Welcome to this deep dive all about mental health.
Mm,
We've got some pretty interesting stuff to go over today,
sure.
from pasted text and understanding mental health, a podcast introduction.
Okay.
Really laying the groundwork here, understanding what exactly mental health is
Mm-hmm.
and why it's so important.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about physical health all the time,
Right.
but mental health is just as important.
Yeah, it's interesting. We often separate the two,
Right.
but they're really intertwined.
Yeah, you wouldn't ignore a broken leg.
Right.
So why do we sometimes just push aside, those feelings of anxiety or
Yeah.
sadness or whatever it is? And I think that's what our sources really emphasize, is that mental health isn't just the absence of, you know, a mental disorder.
Mm-hmm.
It's about really thriving.
Yeah, it's about our well-being,
Yeah,
our emotional, psychological, and social well-being.
right. And it affects so many things.
It does.
It affects our relationships,
Yeah.
the way we handle stress,
Yeah.
the decisions we make.
Yeah, how we see the world.
Totally. And, and one thing they talk about is it's a spectrum.
It is.
So can you explain that a little bit more?
Sure. So, you have optimal mental health on one end
Okay.
and serious mental disorders on the other.
Right.
And most of us fall somewhere in between.
Okay.
And it's not static, it changes
Mm-hmm.
throughout our lives based on what we're going through, what we're experiencing.
Yeah, so it's really fluid.
It
It
is.
can change over time.
Yeah.
And I think, when we start talking about some of these real life examples from the sources,
Yeah.
it really brings it home. I mean, you remember that case of the rising teen suicide rates in Tennessee
Oh, yeah.
back in December of 2023?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, what was it, like almost a quarter of high school students had considered suicide?
Yeah. It's a really staggering number.
It's a huge number.
Yeah.
And they were attributing it to all these different pressures,
Mhm.
that teens are facing these days with societal expectations, social media bullying, substance abuse.
Right. It's a lot.
It's a lot for anybody to handle, let alone teenagers.
Right. And it really shows how, things that are going on outside of us
Yeah.
can really impact us
Yeah.
and how difficult it is to be a teenager.
Yeah. And then there was that story about Marley Stevens from March of 2024,
Oh, yeah.
where she was falsely accused of using AI to cheat.
Hmm.
And she ended up losing her scholarship and being put on academic probation.
Right.
So, that's got to be incredibly stressful
Definitely.
for a young person to be going through that.
Yeah, it shows that really anyone can experience these challenges to their mental health.
Right.
It kind of breaks that myth that only certain types of people
Yeah.
or people with quote unquote weak minds struggle.
Right.
It's really anyone.
It's not about willpower.
It's not.
It's about being human
Yeah.
and going through things.
Hmm.
And, speaking of myths, our sources really emphasize that mental health issues are not as rare as we think,
Right.
that 1 in 4 people will face a mental health problem at some point in their lives.
That's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people. And this was from the World Health Organization in 2024.
Wow.
Yeah. And yet there's still so much stigma
There is.
surrounding it.
Mm-hmm.
People are afraid to seek help because they're afraid of being judged or labeled or seen as weak.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's that stigma, it's that unspoken taboo
Yeah.
that we need to break. And I think a lot of it comes from misconceptions about what it means to get help.
Right.
Some people think therapy is only for severe cases.
Yeah.
Like you have to be, really struggling to go to therapy, or that it's admitting defeat. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think those are myths that need to be debunked.
Okay.
Therapy can benefit anyone,
Mm-hmm.
whether you're going through, a major life transition
Yeah.
or struggling with everyday stress,
Yeah.
or just, want to improve your self-awareness
Right.
or your coping skills.
Mhm.
It's really about being proactive. It's like,
good.
going to the doctor for a physical checkup.
Right.
It's checking in with your mental health.
Yeah.
And it's a sign of strength,
Absolutely.
not weakness.
Yeah, it's taking control of your mental health.
Yeah.
And, seeking out the tools and the strategies to manage life's challenges.
Right. And it's not always medication.
No, it's not.
There's therapy, there's lifestyle changes,
Support groups.
support groups.
Yeah, lots of different things that can help.
Finding what works for you.
Right.
And our sources talk about some really inspiring stories of people overcoming that stigma.
They do.
Like Emily from that article in April of 2024.
Mm-hmm.
She was initially terrified to even talk about her mental health.
Yeah.
But when she opened up to her friends,
Yeah.
she found a whole support system,
She did.
that really helped her through a tough time.
Yeah, it's a powerful reminder that vulnerability can be a source of strength.
Yeah. And then there was Mark, who initially thought that, mental health issues were rare
Yeah.
until he faced his own challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And he became an advocate,
Yeah.
really highlighting the importance of awareness and support.
Yeah, and showing how, when we share our stories,
Yeah.
it helps not only us, but others.
It does. It's really
Yes.
powerful.
Yeah, it creates this ripple effect,
It does.
you know?
And it starts with recognizing that mental health is something that we all need to prioritize,
We do.
and talk about openly and
Yeah.
support each other in.
Absolutely.
So, okay, so we've talked about that spectrum of mental health. We've
Yeah.
debunked some myths,
Yeah.
but how do we actually recognize the signs,
Right.
that someone might be struggling?
Yeah.
Our sources talk about things like persistent sadness,
Yeah.
mood swings,
Right. Excessive worries.
excessive worries. Are there other things that maybe are not so obvious that we should be aware of?
Yeah, definitely. I think, changes in eating or sleeping habits,
Okay.
lack of energy, difficulty concentrating,
Hmm.
even unexplained aches and pains.
Okay.
Those can all be indicators.
So it's not always, dramatic mood swings
Always.
or, constant sadness.
Right.
It could be these more subtle things.
Yeah, subtle shifts in their normal pattern
Right.
and behaviors.
Yeah, so it's really about noticing the changes
Yeah.
in ourselves or in others.
Mhm.
But, it's a unique to each individual, right?
It is.
So what might be a red flag for one person
Yeah,
might be totally normal for another.
right.
That's why, that open communication is so important.
It is.
If you're not sure,
Talk to someone.
talk to a friend, a family member, a therapist,
Yeah.
get some feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And, speaking of seeking help, our sources really emphasize that early intervention is key.
It is.
There was James from January 2024.
Yeah.
He recognized he was feeling increasingly isolated and sad,
Yeah.
and he decided to reach out to a therapist.
Good for him.
And it was a really positive turning point for him.
Yeah. And Lisa, from April 2023,
Mm-hmm.
she noticed changes in her sleep and eating habits,
Yeah.
and she sought help before things escalated.
Wow.
Yeah. So it really highlights the power of, being in tune with yourself
Mhm.
and taking action.
Right. And taking that first step,
It is.
even when it feels scary,
Mm-hmm.
can make all the difference.
Absolutely.
It's about taking ownership
Yeah.
of your mental health
Mhm.
and choosing to prioritize it.
It is.
But I think, there are people out there that are probably thinking, well, that's easier said than done.
Right.
It's scary to reach out for help.
It can be.
What would you say to those people?
I would say, first of all, you're not alone. Millions of people
Mhm.
experience these mental health challenges.
Yeah.
And seeking help is a sign of courage,
Yeah.
not weakness.
Totally.
And there are resources out there,
Mhm.
from therapists to support groups
Yeah.
to online communities.
That can provide that support and guidance that you need.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
It's the reaching out that's the hardest part,
It is.
but it's the most empowering part, too.
Yeah.
It's about taking control
Yeah.
of your well-being
Yeah.
and making that conscious choice
Mhm.
to prioritize your mental health.
It is.
So we've got a lot more to talk about.
We do.
Welcome back to our mental health deep dive. It's amazing what we have covered in just part one.
Yeah. So much good stuff.
Right. We talked about the spectrum of mental health, busted some myths,
Oh.
heard some really inspiring stories of
Mm.
people, really taking control of their well-being. And one thing that really stood out to me was that statistic that 1 in 4 people will experience a mental health challenge at some point in their lives.
Yeah. That's huge.
It's a huge number.
Mm-hmm.
So it really drives home that point that, we need to be approaching this with the same level of care and attention that we do with our physical health. Absolutely. And, just like we wouldn't ignore a persistent cough or a sudden pain.
Right.
We shouldn't brush aside those signs that, maybe our mental health needs a little attention to.
Okay. So let's talk about those signs. In part one, we touched on some of the more common ones like persistent sadness, mood swings. But our sources also highlighted some that are maybe a little less obvious.
Mm.
What are those?
Well, things like changes in your eating or sleeping habits,
Okay.
feeling constantly drained of energy, having trouble concentrating, even experiencing unexplained aches and pains.
Huh.
Those can all be kind of subtle clues that something might be off with your mental well-being.
So it's not always, feeling super down or anxious.
Not necessarily.
Sometimes it's these more subtle shifts in your normal patterns and behaviors.
Exactly. You know, it's like our mind and body are sending us these little signals,
Sure.
trying to tell us something isn't quite right. And the key is to be attuned to these signals, both in ourselves and in the people that we care about.
That makes a lot of sense. But I guess it also makes me wonder, how do you differentiate between what's a normal fluctuation and what's a sign that maybe you need to seek help?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And honestly, there's no easy answer.
Right.
It really is about knowing yourself
Okay.
and your typical patterns. So, for instance, if you're usually a pretty social person and all of a sudden you find yourself withdrawing from friends and activities, that could be a sign to pay attention to. Or if you're someone who generally sleeps well and suddenly you're struggling to fall asleep or waking up constantly,
Right.
that could be another clue.
So it's about noticing those changes that feel out of character for you,
Yeah.
but also acknowledging that, mental health is so unique to each individual.
It is.
So what might be a red flag for one person
Right.
could be totally normal for someone else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why, that open and honest communication is so important.
Yeah.
If you're unsure about something,
Yeah.
talking to a trusted family member
Mhm.
or mental health professional
Yeah.
can provide some really valuable insight.
And speaking of seeking help, our sources really emphasized the importance of early intervention.
Yes. Early intervention is key.
We talked about James's story from January 2024. He recognized that he was feeling increasingly isolated and sad and decided to, reach out to a therapist.
Right.
And it turned out to be a really positive step for him.
It did. And then there's Lisa from April 2023,
Right.
who noticed changes in her sleep and eating habits, and she proactively sought help
Yeah.
before things escalated.
Yeah. It's amazing how, just taking that action,
It is.
even when it feels scary or intimidating, can make such a world of difference.
Yeah.
It's about, recognizing that taking care of our mental health is just as important as taking care of our physical health.
Absolutely.
If we had a broken leg, we wouldn't hesitate to see a doctor.
Right.
So why should we hesitate to seek help when something's going on with our mental well-being?
Yeah. I think sometimes we forget that we kind of put it on the back burner,
Right.
but it's really just as important.
And, it's about breaking down those barriers of stigma, too.
Yeah.
And remembering that seeking help is a sign of strength,
It is.
not weakness.
Right. It's a sign that you're committed to living, a full and balanced life.
Totally. Okay, so let's say we've recognized the signs and we're ready to take that first step. What are our options?
Okay.
What kind of support is available?
Well, the good news is there is a wide range of resources and approaches to address mental health challenges.
Okay.
Our sources highlighted several key options, including therapy,
Okay.
lifestyle changes, support groups.
Let's start with therapy.
Yeah.
What exactly does that involve?
Sure. So therapy, essentially it provides a safe and confidential space
Okay.
for you to explore your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors with a trained professional.
Okay.
And, it's really about gaining insight into yourself,
Oh, yeah.
learning coping mechanisms, developing strategies.
To manage life's challenges more effectively.
So it's not like a one-size-fits-all approach.
No, not at all.
Right.
There are various types of therapies out there,
Okay.
each tailored to address specific needs and challenges.
So give us some examples.
Sure. So one example is cognitive behavioral therapy,
Okay.
or CBT for short.
Okay.
And this approach focuses on identifying and modifying negative thought patterns and behaviors
Okay.
that might be contributing to mental health challenges.
So it's like retraining your brain
Yeah.
to approach situations in a more constructive way.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
What else? There's psychodynamic therapy,
Okay.
and that delves deeper into understanding, how past experiences and unconscious processes might be influencing your present-day thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
So it's more about exploring those deeper roots
Yes.
of what might be going on.
Okay, cool. And are there other approaches, too?
Yeah, there are. There's interpersonal therapy,
Okay.
which focuses on improving relationships and communication patterns.
Interesting.
And there are mindfulness-based therapies, which emphasize being present in the moment
Okay.
and, developing a greater awareness of your thoughts and feelings without judgment.
So it seems like there's a whole toolkit
Yeah,
of different therapies out there, each with its own unique focus and set of techniques.
absolutely.
It's like finding the right tool for the job,
I like that analogy.
right? Depending on what you're trying to address.
It is. It's about finding what resonates with you
Yeah.
and feels like a good fit.
Okay, so therapy is one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
What about those lifestyle changes we talked about?
Right.
I'm curious to hear more about how something as simple as exercise
Yeah.
can actually make a difference.
Well, research has consistently shown that regular exercise has a profound impact on mental well-being.
Really?
Yeah. When we exercise, our brains release endorphins,
Okay.
which have mood-boosting effects.
So it's not just about, looking good or staying physically fit.
Right.
It's those chemical changes happening in our brain
It is.
that can actually make us feel happier.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be anything, super intense.
Right.
Even moderate exercise like brisk walking or swimming
Okay.
can make a difference.
That's encouraging to hear.
Yeah.
What other lifestyle changes can we make to support our mental health?
Well, diet plays a crucial role.
Okay.
Nourishing our bodies with whole, unprocessed foods can help stabilize our mood and energy levels.
So all those sugary treats and processed foods,
Right.
they might give us a temporary boost,
Yeah.
but ultimately they're not doing us any favors.
Not really.
Okay, good to know. What about sleep?
Sleep is huge.
Right.
Getting enough restful sleep is essential for our brains and bodies
Mm-hmm.
to function optimally.
Mm.
When we're sleep deprived, we're much more susceptible to stress,
Right.
irritability, difficulty concentrating.
That makes total sense.
Yeah,
It's hard to think straight when you're exhausted.
it is.
Yeah. And our sources also talked about mindfulness practices like meditation.
Right.
What's the benefit of those?
Well, mindfulness practices like meditation can help us develop a greater awareness of our thoughts and feelings without getting, swept away by them.
Right.
It's about learning to observe our inner experience with curiosity and non-judgment.
So it's like creating a little space
Yeah,
between ourselves and our thoughts,
exactly.
rather than getting caught up in those
Yeah.
mental loops
Mhm.
that can sometimes lead us down that rabbit hole of anxiety or negativity.
Yeah. And even, just a few minutes of daily meditation
Okay.
can have a positive impact.
So it's not about becoming, a Zen master overnight.
Yeah.
It's about incorporating these small but impactful practices
Yeah.
into our everyday lives.
Exactly.
And then there's, the power of human connection. I
Right.
talked about support groups.
Mhm.
But even just spending quality time with loved ones,
Yeah.
engaging in meaningful conversations,
Mm.
nurturing those relationships
Right.
can have such a profound effect on our mental well-being.
It does. It's like that saying, joy shared is joy doubled and sorrow shared is sorrow halved.
Yeah.
Being with people who care about us can lift us up when we're feeling down.
Yeah,
And, being there for others can give us a sense of purpose and connection.
totally. And let's not forget the importance of self-care.
Right.
Engaging in activities that bring us joy and relaxation,
Yeah.
whether it's reading, listening to music,
Yeah.
spending time in nature, pursuing a hobby.
Mhm.
These things can help us recharge and cope with stress more effectively.
They do. It's about giving ourselves permission to prioritize those things that make us feel good,
Right.
even if it's just for a few minutes each day.
It's not selfish.
No, it's essential.
Yeah, it's essential.
Yeah.
So we've got therapy, we've got lifestyle changes, support groups, all really valuable tools for managing mental health.
They are.
But where do we even begin to choose what's right for us?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's something we'll delve into a little bit deeper in part 3. But for now, I think the key takeaway is that there are options available.
Right.
And, seeking guidance from a mental health professional
Mm-hmm.
can really help you determine the best course of action for your individual needs.
Okay, so stay tuned for part 3 where we'll dive even deeper into that. Welcome back to the final part of our mental health deep dive. I gotta say, I'm feeling pretty good about all this.
Me too. It's like just having these conversations out in the open
Yeah,
starts to make a difference.
it does. It makes you realize you're not alone
Exactly.
and that there are things you can do.
Mm-hmm.
So we've covered a lot of ground, right?
Yeah.
We talked about what mental health is,
Mm.
why it matters, how to recognize the signs
Right.
that we or someone we care about might need some support.
Mm-hmm.
But now let's talk about actually putting this knowledge into action.
Yes, let's get practical.
Right.
Mhm.
Because it's one thing to know about it,
Yeah,
but it's another to actually, do something about it,
exactly.
to make those conscious choices, to prioritize our well-being. So in part 2, we started talking about the different support systems available,
Mm,
therapy, lifestyle changes, support groups.
right.
But how do we figure out what's right for us?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is. Where do we even begin?
The truth is, there's no one-size-fits-all answer.
Right.
Because everyone's journey with mental health is different.
Right.
So what works for one person
Yeah.
might not work for another.
Okay. So it's not as simple as, if you're feeling anxious, do this. If you're feeling depressed, do that.
No, It's a little more nuanced than that.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that we're just left to figure it out all on our own.
Right.
Remember that seeking guidance from a mental health professional is always a great first step.
Okay.
They can really help assess your individual needs and create a personalized plan that might involve a combination of different approaches.
Okay, so let's dive back into those approaches.
Yeah.
We talked about therapy before. Can you just give us a little refresher on some of the different types of therapy that are out there?
Sure. So one of the most common types is cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT.
Right.
And this approach focuses on identifying and modifying, those negative thought patterns and behaviors
Right.
that might be contributing to the mental health challenges.
It's like retraining your brain.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
To kind of approach situations in a more constructive way.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay. What about other types of therapy?
There's psychodynamic therapy,
Right.
which kind of delves a little deeper into understanding, how past experiences and unconscious processes
Yeah.
might be influencing your present day, thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
So it's really getting down to the root of what might be going on.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Mhm.
And I know there are even more types of therapy out there.
There's interpersonal therapy, which focuses on improving relationships and communication patterns.
Okay.
And then there are mindfulness-based therapies, which emphasize, being present in the moment
Right.
and developing a greater awareness of our thoughts and feelings without judgment.
So it seems like there's a whole toolkit
There is.
of different therapies, each with its own unique, focus and techniques.
Yeah, it's about finding the right tool for the job.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
Okay, so therapy is one piece of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
What about those lifestyle changes that we discussed earlier?
Right.
I'm really curious to hear more about how something as simple as exercise can actually make a difference.
Yeah. Well, research has shown time and time again that regular exercise really does have a profound impact on our mental well-being.
Wow.
And it's because when we exercise, our brains release these things called endorphins.
Endorphins make you happy.
They do. They have mood-boosting effects.
Okay, so it's not just about, looking good
Right.
or being physically fit.
Yeah, it's not just about the physical benefits.
It's actually changing our brain chemistry
exactly
in a positive way.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be super intense either, right?
No, not at all.
You don't have to be a marathon runner or anything?
Nope. Even moderate exercise,
Okay.
like brisk walking or swimming, can make a difference.
Okay. That's good to know because I think sometimes people get intimidated
Right.
thinking they have to do all
Yeah.
this crazy stuff.
Yeah, you don't have to.
Just get moving.
Exactly.
What other lifestyle changes can we make to support our mental health?
Well, diet is really important.
Okay.
Nourishing our bodies with whole, unprocessed foods
Right.
can help stabilize our mood and energy levels.
So those sugary treats
Mm-hmm.
and processed foods, they might give us that temporary boost, but in the long run,
Yeah,
not so good.
not so much.
Okay. What about sleep?
Sleep is crucial.
I
It's
know.
so important. Getting enough restful sleep is essential
Yeah.
for our brains and our bodies to
Yeah.
function at their best,
Right.
when we're sleep deprived.
Yeah.
We're much more susceptible to stress, irritability, difficulty concentrating.
I mean, it's hard to function
It is.
when you're exhausted.
Yeah.
Our sources also mentioned mindfulness practices,
Yes.
like meditation.
Oh.
What are the benefits of those?
Well, mindfulness practices like meditation can help us develop a greater awareness of our thoughts and feelings
Mm-hmm.
without getting kind of swept away by them.
Yeah.
It's about learning to observe our inner experience with curiosity and non-judgment.
So it's about creating that space
Exactly.
between ourselves and our thoughts.
Yeah.
So we're not so reactive.
Yeah.
We can kind of step back and observe.
Exactly. And even just a few minutes of daily meditation
Yeah.
can make a positive impact.
So you don't have to, sit there for hours on end.
No, just a few minutes.
Okay, good to know. What about human connection?
Human connection is huge. We talked about support groups, but even just spending quality time with loved ones,
Yeah.
engaging in meaningful conversations, nurturing those relationships, that can have such a profound effect on our mental well-being.
It's so true. And, it's like that saying, joy shared is doubled sorrow shared is sorrow halved.
I love that saying.
Right.
It's so true.
And, being there for others can give us that sense of purpose and connection as well.
It does.
Yeah. And let's not forget self-care.
Oh, yeah. Self-care is so important.
So,
Engaging in activities that bring us joy and relaxation,
Yeah.
whether it's Reading, listening to music, spending time in nature,
Yeah.
pursuing a hobby.
Taking a bath.
Yes.
Whatever it is that helps us recharge.
Yeah.
And just kind of de-stress.
It's about giving ourselves permission to prioritize those things.
Right.
That make us feel good.
Because we deserve it.
We do.
It's not selfish.
It's not. It's essential.
It's essential.
Wow.
This deep dive has been packed with so much great information.
It has.
I feel like we've explored this whole landscape of mental health.
We have.
From every angle. You know what it is? Why it matters. How to recognize the signs of struggle. And most importantly, what we can do.
Yes.
To take care of ourselves and support those around us.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some of the key takeaways that you hope our listener will, carry with them?
Well, I think the most important thing is to remember that mental health is just as important as physical health.
Yes.
It's something we all need to prioritize and talk about openly.
Absolutely. No more sweeping it under the rug.
No more hiding it.
Exactly.
And, remember that there is help available.
Yeah.
If you're struggling, don't hesitate to reach out. There are resources and support systems ready to meet you where you are.
And it's not about achieving some perfect state of happiness.
No, not at all.
All the time.
Nope.
It's about, learning to navigate the ups and downs of life.
Yeah.
With resilience.
Yes.
Self-compassion. And a willingness to seek support.
I love that.
When we need it.
Absolutely.
Mental health is a journey.
It is.
Not a destination.
Not a destination.
Well, this has been amazing.
It has. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Me too. Thank you for joining us for this mental health deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And remember, you are not alone, and your mental health matters. Take care.
Take care.